Hi everyone, welcome to Saxon's Hydrosphere. I'm Saxon and I love music and I love movies, and with this channel I wanted to create a space where both music and movie lovers can coexist. And today I'm going to be doing another discography ranking for Coheed and Cambria this time. So Coheed and Cambria have very quickly over the past couple of years become one of my absolute favourite bands, with almost every album in their discography being at least a 7 out of 10 for me, so I thought I would give myself the hard task of adding them to the list of bands I've done album rankings for. I'm counting the studio albums only, meaning no EPs or anything like that, which leaves the nice round number of 10 albums to talk about. So let's get straight into it. Number 10, The Second Stage Turbine Blade. So I know that to long-time Coheed fans this one is widely regarded pretty highly, at least usually hitting the top 5 from what I've seen, but I think for me as somebody who was a little late to the band, there's not much that this one does for me overall. It's not to say that I think it's inherently bad by any means, because some of the songs have a lot to offer, especially tracks like Devil in Jersey City, Time Consumer and Everything Evil, these being the most well put together songs on the album and are a great showcase for just how unique and progressive these guys were compared to their peers at the time. But what really hinders my experience with this one is the production. I just find it really hard to get through with how everything is mixed, and the guitar sound in particular I really don't enjoy, which I understand is a very of-the-time complaint, but it's the main reason why it hits the bottom of this ranking for me, because production and performance-wise, every other Coheed record is a step up from the debut. Number 9, Year of the Black Rainbow. Commonly placed around the bottom for Coheed rankings, and I'm inclined to agree really. My issues are pretty similar to Second Stage in regards to the production being quite strange, and I think there's actually a little more in the way of forgettableness on this album. Whether that quality taking a dip was down to trying to gel with a new drummer or not, I'm not sure, but there's just something about this one that feels a little off, especially after following No World for Tomorrow. Here We Are Juggernaut is a great song, and I also really enjoy The Broken, Guns of Summer and World of Lines, but everything else is just either pretty good or sadly quite forgettable. Number 8, The Colour Before the Sun. So this is another album that tends to be favoured pretty negatively from what I've seen, maybe for the more streamlined and in some parts poppier vibe, but although this is still near the bottom of my list, the jump in my enjoyment between Black Rainbow and this is massive, and I think I seem to enjoy it more than most. But my reason for still putting it at number 8 is just the sheer juxtaposition in quality, because about 50% of the songs I absolutely love, but the other half I really don't care for. There's such a stark contrast in quality here, it's kind of crazy. Songs like Atlas, Island, You've Got Spirit Kid, Colours and Here to Mars I love, but everything else either ranges from pretty forgettable or just not for me, which is a massive shame given how great those other songs are. Something else of note as well is that this is the only Coheed album to not tie into any kind of story surrounding the Amory Wars, and is instead just a collection of songs written, I think, about a lot more personal stuff in Claudio's life, which is a nice change from everything else and definitely makes this album stand out a little differently. So all in all, it's a little frustrating, but there's a lot of good stuff to sink your teeth into, and I personally don't mind the kind of sound they went for here. To be honest, I don't think the sound is all that different really. It's still very much Coheed, but as I said before, just streamlined in its overall direction. Number 7, In Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. While still only making the number 7 spot on my list, Coheed's second album is leaps and bounds above the debut. The songs are better constructed, the performances are much tighter, most notably the guitar playing and Claudio's vocals, and the production is a massive improvement too, with the whole tone feeling much thicker and wider than before, and everything sits in the mix much more comfortably here. I still think there are a few areas that lose momentum or songs that feel a little fillery and not doing much, but the songs that do stand out are amazing. The title track is a great opener which builds and takes the listener through many different emotions. A Favor House Atlantic is an absolute banger and deservedly a staple in their discography still, with a huge vocal performance and a great chorus. Three Evils is a favourite of mine, especially when the energy rises to all-time highs towards the end. The Crowning is a phenomenal progressive rock song with some incredible guitar riffs and complicated lead patterns. Blood Red Skies is a wonderful, more stripped-back song in terms of its more straightforward structure. And the Camper Valorium is the first time Coheed delve into their sweet style of composing, and it's really engaging. And then we have 2113, which is a very well put together 9-minuter closing off the album. So there's a lot I love about this one, but for those areas in which things start to feel a little fillery is why it sits at number 7. Number 6, The Unheavenly Creatures. So just missing the cut of the top 5, but we're getting into the albums now that I really love and can listen to on a pretty regular basis. Unheavenly Creatures, from what I've seen, can be pretty divisive with fans, but I think this is an amazing record. Not only are most of the songs great, but the production is one of the best from the band too, and the all-over experience is incredibly immersive from a narrative standpoint as well, especially with the first full song, The Dark Sentencer. This is by far one of their most atmospheric and dramatic songs under their belts, and I always get a kick out of being brought into the album with this song. There's also a fair bit of grit on this one when we come to songs like The Gutter and All on Fire, as well as getting into the more anthemic and catchy vibes to the way they approach choruses when we get to tracks like Love Protocol, Old Flames, the title track, and my personal favourite on the album, The Pavilion. I think, however, this album is brought down ever so slightly by it being just a little too long, with one or two songs that don't really do much for me. Queen of the Dark and Black Sunday, for example, are pretty forgettable for me, and for sure the weakest songs on the album. Apart from that, though, I still have a great time listening to this one, and it has a real atmosphere unto itself. Number 5, Vaxis 2, A Window of the Waking Mind. So this will actually be the third time I talk about this album on the channel, after doing a review on the time of release, then it making my albums of the year list for 2022, and now in this ranking. And if you've kept up with my channel, you'll know that I love this album. Some of the most anthemic and catchy rock choruses I think I have ever heard are on this record. Now, I may have a bit of a bias and a massive soft spot for this one because, as I mentioned in my review, I was pretty late to the game when it came into diving into their discography, having only really started paying attention to them upon the release of Shoulders, but I genuinely love the style and direction that they take across this album. It is massive for me. So I may have a bit of a bigger love for this record than some of the more long-time diehard fans who might prefer their earlier Coheed sound. It doesn't reach the top for me though, however, because despite this being one of my most played albums over last year, and a lot of this year too actually, there are one or two tracks in here that I might not choose to listen to on their own, like Our Love or Blood. Those songs seem to me to only exist to carry the story narrative. And then there are also times where I'm a bit sensitive to the overproduced drum sound and the deliberately over-the-top auto-tune. Apart from the two songs I mentioned before being okay in the context of a full listen, there aren't any other songs in this album that I'd consider a waste. They are all amazing and a great time. But my favourites will have to be Shoulders, The Liars Club, Comatose, Disappearing Act, and Rise Nasha. So I'm not going to talk too much more about this one through fear of repeating myself, but if you would like to know some of my deeper thoughts about it, check out my initial review or my albums of the year list for 2022. Number 4 and 3, The Afterman, Ascension and Dissension. So whether it's seen as a cop-out or not, I don't know, but I'm going to count both Afterman albums as one entry on this list because they're both pretty on par for me in terms of my own enjoyment, and I really don't know which one I'd place above the other. It's also worth mentioning from here is what I consider to be peak Coheed. These final 4 entries are also extremely close that it was really hard to rank them, so just bear that in mind that I love everything from here on out. These two records have a real darker aura to them compared to the rest of the discography and are also very unique in the production and sonic landscape, and they even get a little more experimental in places which I really like too. Something else of note is that these albums saw the return of Josh on the drums, and he's just as incredible as he always had been, and also brings in newcomer Zach Cooper on the bass after the band had parted ways with Michael Todd due to his drug habits and arrest for armed robbery. But Zach is a very welcomed addition to the band too, being an exceptional player and completing the Coheed lineup that we still have today. Now onto the actual songs, and like I said, there's a lot that feels so much darker here, especially when we get into the Key Entity Extraction installments. All 5 of these songs feeling really distinct from one another, which is sometimes a worry of mine with Sweets, but here they all stand apart as singular tracks, and some of the riffs and guitar playing on these songs hit so hard. And on the flip side of that, there's also a lot of tonal levity and positivity in here too to counteract that darkness, with songs like Good Night My Fair Lady and Away We Go, both of them being 2 of my favourites in the discography. And while on the topic of favourites, The Hard Sell is probably in my top 10 Coheed songs altogether, with the amazing groove on that main riff, the vocal harmonies and the explosive chorus. Number City on Dissension feels quite experimental and the delivery is just perfect, taking you on a real ride, as well as the title track on Ascension being really spacious and immersive, kind of making you feel like you're drifting or drowning in space. It's so engaging. And then finally we have those softer sides too, taking things in a lot more of an emotive direction with songs like The Dark Side of Me and Subtraction. So I really love these 2 albums, and most of the time if I'm to listen to one, I will pretty much have to listen to the other straight afterwards as well. And like I said at the beginning, this was a close call between these and my top 2, but they have to be ranked, so for me the Afterman's going to take the bronze medal. Now let's get into silver. Number 2, No World for Tomorrow. No World for Tomorrow is an amazing and energetic experience from start to finish, in all honesty, with every track being incredibly memorable and fun. The unique aspect about this album is it features the late and great Taylor Hawkins on drums, which I think is a major factor in the amount of energy that drives this one. That's not to say that Josh lacks energy on previous or subsequent albums by any means. On the contrary, I adore Josh's drumming and actually often wonder what this record would sound like if he'd stayed on. But Taylor's specific delivery does stand out and makes a very unique stamp on this album. The amount of songs that put more of an emphasis on hooks and anthemic choruses are higher here on any other of the albums leading up to this point. Songs like Gravemakers and Gunslingers, The Running Free, The Hound, and Justice in Murder, to name a few. Mother Superior is, I think, one of the band's best epics that grows and takes you through a multitude of emotions and atmospheres, and I think the 5-part finale to the album is done exceptionally well too, being their best and most coherent suite in my opinion. All that said though, there's still one more final Coheed album to go that just about manages to steal the first place position. Number 1. Good Apollo, I'm Burning Star 4, Volume 1, From Fear Through the Eyes of Madness. God, that's a mouthful. I think this could have possibly been anybody's guess to take first place. For what I'm aware, this is the band's most well-known album due to Welcome Home having been a huge hit for them and the song that I believe comes to most people's minds when they think of Coheed. And while in all honesty I think No World for Tomorrow is ever so slightly a more fluid start-to-finish experience, I think firstly Good Apollo has a couple more standout tracks with the aforementioned Welcome Home, The Suffering, 10 Speed of God's Blood and Burial, Apollo 1, Crossing the Frame, Wake Up, etc. Secondly, I think I prefer the production and performances on this compared to the follow-up, albeit only slightly. And finally, and probably my biggest reason, is I think the diversity and style and writing is better on this album too, with the range in dynamics across the board. I do, however, only have one tiny issue with this album, and the fact that it doesn't remove it from the top spot really is a testament to the rest of the music. And that is that I don't think Apollo 2 is different enough from Apollo 1 to warrant it being another track entirely, especially on an album that clocks in at just over 70 minutes. Like I said though, that doesn't stop this album being at number 1, because in the grand scheme of things, with music as great as this, an almost complete reprisal of one of my favourite songs on the album really isn't too big a flaw. Every song constantly boasts amazing and innovative musicianship that gets stuck in your head and is full of brilliant and diverse vocal performances from Claudio, stacked with harmonies aplenty that are always so fun to sing along to. The energy is here, the emotion is here, and the impressive musicianship is here, and it's all in service to the whole album experience, and that's why it takes the gold medal in my Coheed and Cambria ranking. So there we have it, all 10 Coheed and Cambria albums ranked from the worst to the best in my opinion, and in all honesty the winner of the battle between Good Apollo, No World for Tomorrow and the Aftermath albums could change depending on the day really, because as I said, I love all 4 of those albums for very different reasons, but putting objectivity into the mix, I'm pretty happy with where I've placed them here. Be sure to let me know down below how you'd rank the Coheed and Cambria albums. Do you disagree with me? Do you agree with me? I want to know about it. And do subscribe to the channel if you liked this video and consider checking out more of my videos. I do also have a Patreon where you can keep up to date with what I'm up to, take part in a few polls, and gain early access to my videos, so it would be great if you were to check that out too. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you all in the next one.